I think the future of mobility is going to be enabled and accelerated by the latest trends amongst the younger generation, the more conscientious generation that we've got. But also technology is going to have to play a bigger role in the future of transport. Transport of the past was more of a utility that you made access to, you availed yourself of, and you got on with your job. Whereas these days, our mindset, our expectations are affected and impacted on by the likes of Netflix, by the Googles, by the Facebooks, by the Instagrams of this world. So immediacy of the service, availability of the service, and the experience associated with the service, rather than utility, becomes a driver for the future of transport. That's number one trend that I can see transport following in the future. Experience and a more user-centric experience for our end users. Number two is carbon emission, and the environment becomes a big factor. Some of the latest decisions that I've made in terms of the airlines that I choose to travel with have actually been driven by the CO2 factors associated with every flight. Now, this is something that I didn't actually care for about 10 years ago, but these days, when I go and choose the airline to go to the UK or the US to see family, I actually take that into account. And I have made decisions where I haven't been necessarily financially driven. I've been driven by the CO2 emission associated with a particular airline. So environment, carbon footprint, and experience, biggest drivers in transportation. And lastly, interconnectedness of transportation systems. We are no longer dealing with silos. We're dealing with vehicles, with shared vehicles such as Uber, immediately accessible vehicles such as Uber, trains, railways, buses, ferries. These need to be interlinked and supported by an integrated transportation infrastructure where we provide transport as a service rather than trains and ferries and buses or cars. They're all one and the same, but they're shared as part of a large ecosystem that are connected and orchestrated by technology. I think the largest challenge right now for the operators, particularly from a public services perspective, transportation agencies from a public service standpoint, providing a service to customers, is making that shift from utility to experience. How do I transition and shift to become a provider of an experience and a greater service as opposed to a utility? That is a shift of paradigm. I think Transport for New South Wales has made that. They're making serious headways compared to the rest of the country in front-running the trends. That's number one, making that shift. Number two, we've just come off the back of COVID. We haven't quite started utilizing transportation to the same extent that we did before. Like it or not, that's a fact. So we're going to have to deal with this. How do we deal with it? Experience, front of mind. Safety, number two. Health and hygiene, number three. Availability and transparency of information, number four. These are real considerations for transport providers like Transport for New South Wales. Thirdly, that interconnected orchestration of different modes of transport. Personal vehicles, shared vehicles, trains, buses, ferries. All of those to become an ecosystem, to actually build a network that collects all the information and gives me the right access to the right transportation with the right metrics and insights to help with my decision making will be the next frontier of change. Because most of these, because even when you look at Uber, they've done fantastic, but within their own ecosystem. How do I break Uber up to Transport for New South Wales and all the different modes of transportation that transport provides to personal vehicles? All of that will be the next frontier of change, I think. And lastly, as I said earlier, I think it's actually giving some consideration, not lip service, to what to do around CO2 emission and the environment. Wipro has made significant strides through history in evolving from its genesis, which, believe it or not, was a manufacturer of oil products in India, to become a technology provider in the 1970s, to where we are now, where Wipro provides technology services, security services, managed services, cloud services, and quite well across the globe. Wipro is now focusing on, through its Lab 45, which is a venture of Wipro, on creating mobility as a service, mobility as a platform. In fact, we are significantly investing in Silicon Valley in the US and outside of the US in what I mentioned earlier on, which was an interconnected platform of mobility services, and bring them all together as a experience mode to our end users. So I think we are leveraging our genesis, our background, our expertise, and our skills to not only respond to the demands of our customers and consumers in different markets, but also start setting trends for what the future may look like, looking at other transformations that are happening across different industries, such as Instagram, such as Netflix, and so on and so forth, to provide a better experience for our consumers. I think what's really stood out to me so far has been the participation of Transport for New South Wales business areas in this event. Technology is an enabler, but it's not the business itself. So business needs to work a lot more closely with technology to translate its requirement to what technology can do to underpin and support it. Today I've seen a greater participation by the business, and many of the sessions that are participating have been focused on trends, expectations of the business that are driven by the expectations and the requirements of the consumers and the community. What do my passengers need to see, right? Those expectations have come through loud and clear, and therefore as service providers, we're now trying to be better aligned with what the reality of demands look like for transport, as opposed to what the next coolest and funkiest technology may look like. Because at the end of the day, tech on its own is meaningless. It's only become meaningful when you and I use the iPhone, which fundamentally shifted and transformed the way phones are used. We never used phones as anything but making text, which was at best a very laborious kind of process, or making phone calls, to now anything that I want to do is on my phone. And that was because the company was fundamentally focused not on technology, but on providing a better user experience. What does the user actually expect, and how do I provide that for them immediately and with promptness?